Okay, well, we've looked at being enthroned and as sons having a position in heaven, which is where we begin to establish things so that they can come onto earth, where we get involved with God's kingdom so that God's kingdom can come on earth as it is in heaven, because that's ultimately his desire. You know, he doesn't want all these things in heaven without any outworking on earth. It's got to be practically outworked. That's why a lot of visionary things, if they don't have a practical application to bless people, then what are they for? And we're here to bring a blessing. Be blessing to each other, to be a blessing to our neighbors, to our friends, to our family, to our area, to our community. And you may have different ways of doing that. Us, we have a blueprint that helps us bless different areas of people in our society, but those who are disadvantaged in some way. And the disadvantage can be in lots of different ways. Financially disadvantaged, disadvantaged by being in an addiction, not having a house, but also being lonely, being sick, being mentally unwell. All those things give us an opportunity to bless people. But others may be a completely different way of blessing people. That's why every blueprint and every ecclesia and every expression of heaven on earth will be different, because they're all designed to be different to carry God's heart for that situation. And in this town, we may need many expressions of what God's heart is to reach people in different ways, because there's a lot of diversity, and God's a diverse God in that he's not boring. He is creative, and he has made all these amazingly wonderful people around the world creatively, and he rejoices in our diversity and our difference and everything else. So we also, in what we do, reflecting heaven, will reflect it differently. But if we're on that throne, is there any help in regards to what we do when we sit there? Because I had no clue of what to do when I first was shown and given a throne. Well, I had no idea what to do. It was like, I had no idea about anything, because I was on a journey of discovery, and I was shown a lot of things, and they were experiences of forerunners, and they stirred my imagination, but I didn't really understand what to do. You know, so I needed to be taught. I needed to be discipled. And Jesus started to disciple me, and the Father started to disciple me, but then they introduced me to others. So what do you do from on a throne? Well, you rule. How do you rule? Well, how does a government rule in your country, wherever you live? What form of government is there? How does it work? Well, heaven isn't a democracy, you know, it's a theocracy. You know, God is king, but he delegates his authority to his children to be co-heirs with him and heirs of what he's created, so we can also be participating. So we need to learn his heart. How does he does things? You know, if I'm going to do something, I really want to make sure I'm doing it out of the heart of God. Yes, I can do it creatively, because I am creative. He's made me a creative son. So he doesn't give me a list of instructions of what to do. So I've got to follow. It's not like having a flat pack and trying to put it all together using usually useless instructions or trying to get it to work. It's not like that. He gives me his heart, and then he inspires me to express his heart through me. So when I first started to do this, you know, I was trying to do things like other people would do it, because, you know, Ian Clayton does some things, other people do some things, and it's just like, oh, well, yeah, we can do this and whatever. But God was like, well, that's not you. So don't try and be like anyone else, just be you. So just relax and just flow and just be you. So I just started to do that. And over time, I learned more and more as he showed me, and as he spoke to me, it gave me a clue of how I was to speak. So I just learned, you know, the different courts. I went to the different courts of heaven. I didn't know what they even were when I first went there. It was just like, well, this is really interesting. What goes on here? You know, but I saw some things, and then eventually I was taken and shown what I could do there. So a lot of these things are learning. You know, they're a learning process of being discipled and growing in that discipleship to become more confident of the position you're sat in. Because when you first start to do anything, you usually are learning the ropes. You're trying to find out what's the best way of doing this, you know? go into a new job, and you may get some basic instruction of the company and how the company works, but then you find how you can effectively do that job the best way. So when God shows Jesus, the Father shows to Jesus what he's doing, shows him his heart, he doesn't give Jesus a whole list of instructions. So Jesus did the things he did creatively, which is why he did things differently, to show it wasn't a formula, and actually to show that we can be creative. When you lay hands on somebody to pray for them, if you're mandated to do so, let's say someone's sick and you're going to lay hands on them, don't just do what you did last time, or don't just do what might have worked last time, because it might not work this time. Actually, begin to tune in to the heart of God, and then let your spirit lead you what to do. Sometimes you might speak. Sometimes you might lay hands on them. Sometimes you might say, let's take communion together. Sometimes you might do something completely different to that, because you're inspired to minister through your spirit's creativity, not just out of a formulaic way of doing it. Which means we always got to be relational with God and in tune with him, but also we've got to be realizing that he's made us his children to be responsible to do these things through who we are. You know, and that's the important thing. Don't get caught up in formulas. Anything that I do and put online is a starting point for you to develop something yourself, not to parrot fashion things I do, because they're my words, you know, and they're not supposed to be your words, but they're supposed to inspire you to get your own words, you know. So our communion prayers and declarations, yeah, I use them because I developed them, but I wouldn't expect someone just to parrot fashion what I say and expect it just to work. You know, it's got to be more how you would say that. How would you talk to God and ask him to bring his life into your physical body, to bring health and wholeness? What would you say? How would you decree things? Let it be yours, because when it's yours, you carry life in it, which comes from you. So in all these things, what do? Don't do it formula, whatever you do. Do it inspired and let your spirit lead. I do not work out what I'm going to do on the throne before I do it, because then I would have a formula to follow rather than I am going to be inspired to decree or declare. And let's say I have a law. So we've got lots of different laws that we've developed here in the realms of heaven. That law empowers me to do something. The law in itself actually carries nothing other than the empowerment for me to do something. If I don't do anything, the law is useless. And me saying the law says I can do this really doesn't do anything. I have to do this. So if the law says you can declare freedom over the children of God from their religious mindsets and bondages, then I need to declare freedom over people's religion, because that actually is what I'm called to do. So then I might be on my throne and I might start calling to particular people groups or particular thing. As I'm led, I might call that into my family, or I might call that into the ecclesia, I might call that into the Joshua generation. And I'm calling and I'm sending angels out to give people dreams that stir up their restrictions, to show them where they're limited. I do all that. Just because I have a mandate that says you can do this, I then do it in multiple different ways. And I might do that one day and I might not do that again for another month, because I might not need to. So it's all very much relational and active rather than just a rigid do this and do it this way. So what do we do? How do we do it? The kingdom of God is about legislation. So you have to do something to rule, to establish rule. You can't just sit there and hope that you're sitting there will effectively make things happen. It won't. You know, you'll just be sat there. And then you probably get frustrated because it's like, well, what's the point of sitting here if nothing changes? Something changes because you change. You know, when you make a declaration, normally it starts working with you first. I didn't realize that first, and God sort of got me on that one. Just like, oh, I thought I was making these declarations of freedom from religious mindsets and old thinking and getting people free to know the truth. And it's actually God saying, see all the fingers pointing at you. Now I've got you. Now you've declared this over yourself. Now you've given me authority to start revealing all the restrictions you've got, which is what he did. Beginning in 2016, he asked me to legislate every day. And so I, okay, didn't know what to do. So I went to ask for insight into what I was authorized to do in certain laws and started doing them. First one was this freedom from restrictions and things. So I did it. And then God starts to take me through 2 years of freeing me from all the restrictions that I had, which I didn't know I had. You know, and I was shocked over some of the things that I didn't know I had until I got deconstructed of all these mindsets and different things, so I could then begin to see things from a totally different perspective. You know, totally different perspective. The last 2 years have been like removing veils from my eyes over and over again. So we have to do something. What is it that we do? Well, legislation. You know, what is legislation? I mean, you know, if you've not in any form of government, local government or anything else, or you won't really think legislatively, legislation is the process of making or enacting laws. That's really what it is. So if there is a law, you can use it if you have permission to use it. Or if you don't have a law, you can make one. Now, someone said to me, well, surely all the laws are already there in heaven. I said, well, think of on earth. In 1934, did we need a law to actually facilitate us using the internet? No, because there wasn't an internet. So we are in this day serving the purpose of God in this generation. We shouldn't be trying to use laws from the last generation. You know, we've got some laws on the statutes in the UK which have never been removed. Like you can't drive geese up through the city street or something. I mean, ridiculous things. They just never got off the statute books because they were useful in 1730 or something, but they're not very useful today. So we need up-to-date things to enable us to do what we're called to do today. And that is very much what you can do to establish legislating laws that say you have got the authority to do this, rather than, I know God wants me to do this, but I don't really know how, and I don't really feel empowered. What do I do? Well, there's a process. And when we look at the courts, we can see where you go and what court to get certain things. So if you have been given a law, you can use it. You can enact it. What is it then to legislate? Is to use the authority of that piece of legislation or law to provide, create, prepare, or rule. And I got this from the dictionary. This isn't sort of anything super spiritual. It's just basically what the word means. So where do we get that legislation and where do we legislate? So in the courts of heaven, there are different things. And is there any help to help us in this journey? Otherwise, you can be wandering around trying to find things or where you should do things. Now, obviously, I teach people what I've learned so that you can then at least get a starting point for you to learn more. That's why forerunners exist, because you do something, you learn how to do something, and then you can pass that on so that others can learn easier. So you don't necessarily have to go through the whole process of learning all these things. If I can say, well, here's what God showed me, then take that and go and see if that works for you. But what will probably happen is you'll find how it works for you in your scenario and your setting. But there is help in all these positions of sonship. Obviously, we have this Zechariah 3:7. There is a process there, but if we're going to have govern my house and have charge of the courts, then we do need some insight to how the court works. If I walked into a local court and started asking the judge to explain things to me, he probably wouldn't be too impressed because he's there to judge. If it's a magistrate's court, he'd be a magistrate thing. I go in there and I observe what goes on and I keep my mouth shut. Generally, otherwise, I mean, I have been to court and I've been a witness in court and I've actually been on a jury in court. So you get shown what you do as a jury. Because I didn't know what I was supposed to do other than give a verdict at the end of it. But you've given some insight into, well, you can do this and you can do that, or you can ask this question, or you can refer this back to the judge, or you can do lots of different things. So I had no idea until I was called to jury service and had to go and do it and was given this information. You know? So it's the same in heaven. You can see some things, but then when you're seeing, you may need more information to say, well, what is that? How does that work? What am I entitled to do here? Am I just here to watch, or what do I do when I get here? So there is this sense of governing, ruling, having charge of these places. It's like there are lots of different courts of heaven. The whole system of government, the court of strategy or war, angels, chancellors, scribes, court of the upright, court of kings, all that functions within kingdom of God, kingdom of heaven, heaven. And then above that, in the heavens, there's even more things. Court of judges, the court of the Lord, court council of 70, the court of 70, all that stuff. So much of that, I had no idea about. It wasn't something, but all of a sudden, one day I woke up and I could do all that. I went into each of those places. I was taken into some of those places by Jesus. Sometimes the Holy Spirit would engage me, but eventually I went into all those places and I experienced some things in there. And in some of them, I actually started to function. Now, I couldn't function in the Court of Chancellors until I was given the responsibility as a Chancellor to function there. Even though I used the Court of Chancellors on the other side of the bench, and I presented things to the Chancellors, and they authorized them. And one day we were doing some legislation here, and we were producing some laws, and we took it into the Court of Kings, and we made the declaration of these laws, and then we took it to the Court of Chancellors, and I was there involved. This is corporate. We were doing probably 10 or 12 people doing it, and we were all following this process through, and I actually sat at the Chancellor's bench on the other side. So the things that we were presenting, I was actually adjudicating on. I thought, well, this is a bit conflict of interest. Felt a bit odd, but okay, I sat down there and with 2 or 3 other Chancellors, and one of the others who was in the activation actually saw me doing it. And they were a bit hesitant to say, because they thought, I might got it wrong. But eventually I managed to get them to say, what did you see? I said, well, I saw you sat at the actual bench. I said, well, yeah, I did. And I do that quite a lot. Mostly not for our stuff, but for other people's things. So learning how to do this, it's not obvious by just reading a title of a name. When you go there, you can see some things. Now, I can only share what either I know by personal experience or what I trust other people. And I generally just share mostly my personal experience, because that I know, because I have a testimony of. You may well engage these courts and find there are lots of other things that you can do there that I haven't done. And that's okay. Don't be limited by someone else's experience. Let their experience be the platform for you to have your own, so that might expand. Because what I do in the Court of Kings has a particular governmental legislative perspective. But I'm sure the Court of Kings also operates in other aspects that other people may well develop or find that they can do those things. So we need to learn how to engage these things. In my journey, the 7 spirits of God, and particularly wisdom, not the spirit of wisdom, but wisdom, as in Proverbs 8, really helped. So God has provided some tutors to help mature us in sonship. Now you think, well, why didn't he just do it himself? Because he's assigned others to do it. Because actually engaging 7 different beings who carry the essence of a particular aspect is easier to engage than one being who carries all those aspects. Because when I engage God, often I'm overawed, or I'm in awe, or I'm being hugged. There's in the tutors, there are specific roles that they have in helping us. So Galatians 4:1-2 says, an heir, though he be Lord of all, is under tutors and governors until the appointed time. So this is the maturing process of being discipled effectively. A tutor does mean someone who trains you. That's what they do. So God has assigned people to train us. And that may be the 7 spirits of God. It could be angels. It could be some of the men in white linen, cloud of witnesses. It could be the God himself. I mean, it's all sorts of tutoring and training that goes on. A governor means someone that teaches you how to rule, or who rules over you until you can rule. So there's a process where we learn in safety so that we don't wreak havoc across the universe. You know, because I can imagine some people with a vivid imagination trying to do all sorts of stuff, you know, whereas we need to learn to govern responsibly. It doesn't mean it can't be fun or it isn't exciting, but it needs to be responsible because it needs to be aligned with the heart of God. Now, God does have a sense of humor, mostly at my expense when I engage him, because he laughs a lot at me. But we are those heirs. Galatians 3:29 says we're heirs of the promise, and we're joint heirs with Christ. So we do need to be tutored. An heir of the promise needs to be trained to become a joint heir with Christ. Just because it says I'm a joint heir doesn't mean I can immediately do everything that he could do without being tutored and trained and discipled into that. That's why Jesus spent 3.5 years with 12 people and a whole lot of others around him, actually training them, being with them, talking to them, sharing his heart with them. Yes, sometimes correcting their things that they were doing, and there was a whole interaction between that. That's the interaction we can have in the same process of being trained and engaged.
How do we make sure we're aligned with the heart of God?
You spend time with the heart of God, in the heart of God, and actually talking to God, sharing his heart, listening to him, knowing his character, and just going deeper into his precepts, statutes, and laws. All that comes by relationship. You can only really know by knowing, and knowing is by experience. So it isn't you're going to be given a legislation manual and you'll read it and then you'll know everything to do. It doesn't work that way. I'm a manual type person. I mean, I download manuals before I even buy anything, so I can find out what they do and what they can't do to see if I want to buy them. Because I like to see all the instructions. Then I'll go and find a forum which tells me all the things that went wrong, and all the things you use to correct it, because I'm a geek when it comes to stuff like that. So, but God doesn't give you a manual, so the Bible is not your manual to help you do any of this stuff. It isn't designed to be a manual. So I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole. So bottom line is you need a relationship. The relationship is what will bring a revelation as you learn to hear God's voice, as you learn to hear him speaking to you, as he shows you things, as he gives you encounters that just explode your perceptions of what he might be like, or everything will take you deeper. Deep calls to deep. So I may have a relationship with God, which I think is absolutely amazingly intimate, but there is always going to be a deeper relationship. Because how can I plumb the depths of an infinite God with my finite mind until my finite mind starts to get expanded to be able to take on with a capacity to embrace more of the very character and nature of God?
I'm presuming he's not going to give you mandates to do anything until you've got the heart to be able to do it.
Well, Jesus sent the disciples out, and he sort of trusted them to go and do some stuff, and then he gave them a little bit of a thing afterwards, a debrief, and it's like, well, yeah, don't be so happy that things respond to you. Think more about it like this, because they were like, hey, look at us. So yeah, you're not going to be perfect. You don't have to be perfect for God to use you. You have to be willing. And most of the things I've done are learning on the job. I don't think God ever taught me to do something before I did it. So, but I've spent a lot of time with him, and of course I'm doing it not independently of him. So as I do it, I'm still with him. And, he writes things on my heart. And even though I don't necessarily read it, because that's not what really it's talking about, is that he's putting there things that inspire you, motivate you, and draw you towards certain things and ways. But we're all on a journey of purification and refining. So it does mean you will make mistakes. You will sometimes have a wrong heart or the wrong motive. But God is not there waiting to jump on you. He's there waiting to correct that. Because what it will usually do is indicate there's something in our lives that needs dealing with. We don't deliberately go out and try and do something outside of the heart of God. but we might not know that that little area in our heart that causes us to feel angry about a certain situation will influence what we do when God gives us something. But then when you start to feel things like frustrations, or you start to feel things like anger, or even embarrassment, or any reaction to a certain situation, I will use those things to help me to see, is that showing me something that is highlighting something in my life that needs dealing with? So God taught me a whole process, and it's in the transformation series, on using trauma to bring transformation. And that can be very mild trauma or severe trauma. But often it's mild in that, here's my reaction. Why was I defensive when that person started talking to me? Or why was I trying to impress that person? So I become more sensitive to why I was thinking or acting the way I was, because God showed me to be reflective. So I become more sensitive to the workings of my soul. And so then something would happen. I would then, okay, I need to take this back and find out why. I would take it back to God, start talking to God. Why? Can you give me some insight? I might need to go to court and take that reaction to court. Is there an accuser that actually has some legal right to stimulate me to respond angrily in that situation, or to be defensive? So it was a whole process there that I learned and began to think more reflectively, to allow him to unveil things that I normally might just have completely missed or ignored. Those things are part of the process where we learn to grow and mature by being changed. So you will find all those things come up in this process of learning to legislate. The frustrations of where it doesn't come into your time scale. I felt that. I know other people have. Well, I've been doing this for years. Why am I not seeing the change? So there may be a reason. Then that will provoke you to find the reason, not just keep being frustrated, because ultimately you'll end up getting disappointed, and that will, hope deferred makes the heart sick. Things won't flow from your heart right, and then you'll just be a vicious circle, and you'll end up spiraling downwards. So it's always good to be open to it. I ask for debriefs on when I do something. Is there anything I could have done better or differently? And I ask him, and sometimes he says, yeah. And we try and debrief things that we do here with, is there a better way of doing that? Now, that does open people, if they have any insecurity, to feel that you're getting at them, or you're trying to punish them for getting it wrong. We just need to learn. It's like there is no right or wrong. There's just, hey, is there a better way? And actually, did we think about this when we did this? No. Oh, well, we better think about that next time, because that had a consequence. We call it the law of unintended consequences. You do something and you don't think about what impact it's going to have, and you don't prepare for the impact, and then you suffer the impact. So now I think a lot more about what I'm doing and what it might accomplish, which, if I had sort of said to God, yes, I'm going to start the Engaging God program, and I'd actually thought about what might happen, I would have prepared for 200 people and not 20. But I was operating out of my own limitations of, I don't think I can handle more than 20. But God had a bigger picture, and I had to learn on the job really quickly to do things for 200 people. So I had to put 200 people or 20 groups in my diary to meet them once a month. So let's say that's at least several meetings a week with people. And that was on top of all the other meetings I already had with people. Now I looked at my diary, and that's not going to work. But God said it will. So then I said, well, you have to teach me how it will work then. So then he started to teach me how to frame and shape time so that I could do everything that I was called to do. That came out of necessity and desire, because all of a sudden my diary is full. How am I supposed to even prepare teaching for an Engaging God program when I'm spending all my time doing this, which I love doing? But so I learned, and then I grew in that. and then all the administration of that. Because initially for the first 6 months or more, I did everything, all the emails, all the replies, all the posting things, all the developing of the PowerPoint, all of answering people's technology problems because it didn't work. And I didn't know why it didn't work because I'm not an Apple person. Don't like their philosophy, so I don't have their stuff. So, but they don't play with other people. So I'm trying to get them to play with Microsoft. They didn't. So all that stuff, all going on. So I learned, on the job, because I trusted that God would enable me to be able to facilitate whatever he wanted me to do. And he taught me. I didn't go into it all fully prepared, having read the manual and knew exactly what to do. So we don't automatically inherit promises. We have to grow into the maturity of those things being released. So there is a training process. As heirs, all of us have huge potential to become mature. We need to be trained, though. And it's okay. God doesn't expect you to know what you don't know. He isn't a hard taskmaster, and he's not going to come down on you hard when you don't know something. But what you don't know, pursue for. Seek him for everything you need to know. So I frame my day that I will have everything I need to have to enable me to do everything I need to do in that day. So if I need insight and revelation that I don't yet have, I'm already calling it into being, or I'm connecting my spirit to the source that can flow that. Because I do get asked all sorts of questions from all sorts of people all over the world, and I've no idea what they're going to ask. I don't actually ask for questions like I do here, so I can read them. I just sit there and we talk. So I never know what they're going to ask. But I know that whatever I need, I will be able to share, because I've already organized that. That's already in place. I have the full expectation that I will be able to do that, because that's what my destiny is, and he promises to enable me to do it. But along the way, there were a lot of help that took me into that place. So who are the tutors that are designed by God to mature us? 7 spirits of God, wisdom, angelic beings, cloud of witnesses, God himself. The 7 spirits of God actually came to Jesus with gifts that were in recognition of his kingship and his position and his identity. And they imparted to him revelation as a child that discipled him. Luke 2:52 says, and Jesus kept increasing in wisdom and stature in favor with God and men. Why? Because he was being discipled. And the 7 spirits were part of that discipleship process to him. How did that happen? Well, they trained him. Here's a scripture which is referring to Jesus. Isaiah 50 verse 4. The Lord God has given me the tongue of disciples, that I may know how to sustain the weary one with a word. He awakens me morning by morning. He awakens my ear to listen as a disciple. That's Jesus. That was actually what it was talking about. And if that was what Jesus did, it will be really good if we learn to do the same. So when we awaken morning by morning, now if you're a night person, okay, but the Bible says awaken in the morning, So I do things at night, but very rarely do I ever get woken up to do anything. I do things sometimes later at night. Mostly I do things in the morning because I'm preparing for that day. And it makes much more sense to me to actually prepare the day that I'm in. So he awakens my ear to listen as a disciple. Well, I've learned to listen and embrace whoever he sends to speak to me and learn. Now, what I discovered was that although I met the 7 spirits of God and I was introduced to them and they were very helpful initially, I really then sensed that they were always behind the scenes helping me with that position and those mandates and those things. Sometimes I sense one of them turn up in a particular situation, often the Spirit of the Lord, but I'm aware when you spend time with somebody or something, someone, an angel or whatever, you become more sensitive to the awareness of their presence. And I'm aware that my angels are with me, even though I'm not sort of looking at them in the spirit, or they may not be saying anything, but I'm aware. And I'm also aware when the Father comes and engages me I'm aware when Jesus, I'm also aware in a sense of the seven spirits. Now, I know some people are very personally interacting with them, in that there is a place in heaven which is a training hall which you can go and sign up to courses, and some people sit in heavenly classes being taught. I never did that, never felt really led to do it, but I know some people do, so I know it must be something which is available to them. And I have seen it, and wisdom showed me where it was, so I can tell you where it is. And you might feel, yeah, I need to go and get some training in this or that. And there is places in heaven to do it. It's like people talk of the University of Heaven with classrooms, and I talk to people all over, and they share things that they've done, and like, do you know about this? I'm like, no, never been there, never done that, but resonates with something else that I've seen or whatever. We all will learn different ways, and some people like classroom education. I've been taught on the job. So that wasn't the way God did it with me, but it doesn't mean that he couldn't do it with you. If you desire that, pursue it. Everything comes from desire. As the desire of your heart, it awakens things into reality. So if you'd like to be trained in certain areas, ask God to show you where to go to sign up for a training course. Why not? Why wouldn't God want to train you? But for me, I found it easier to be trained on the job. Now, I believe we're in a shifting time. Things are changing. The way we used to learn is changing. So I don't really believe that what I'm doing now is the ultimate goal of what things should be like. I think there will be different ways in which God enables us to disciple each other and whatever. But we're still at the beginning of something new. And in the beginning, usually you have an emphasis of really trying to establish that foundation of the beginning, which would then, I think, will be different when things start to really be built. So I really don't want to keep on doing this type of thing forever. But I do want to continue relating to people and finding ways that we can interact to discover how God wants us to move. So I do believe there's a shift coming. And what God said to me was these governors and tutors are being released to prepare that shift for a new order of things. A different order. We're no longer going to operate on the earthly order of priesthood. We're operating on the order of Melchizedek, which is the heavenly priesthood of the royal priesthood of that. And then heaven and earth can come into agreement. So that's why the fivefold ministry and all this stuff, there's this tension between who's in charge and how does it function. But this new order is coming. So the cloud of witnesses, the seven spirits of God, are here to train and tutor us in our positions as lords and kings in sonship. We must be willing to embrace and engage them if we're going to fulfill our destiny to rule and bring dominion. Whichever way that works for you, really ask for help. Just as the seven spirits of God are released by God, the enemy also talks about seven spirits. Jesus said, if you are not filled with something good, then something bad will come and try and get at you. So be aware that the enemy will try and counterfeit what God does, and he will always try and train you into something bad. So it makes you feel miserable or hurts you in some way, and then you get damaged, and your heart gets hard, or you get stones or memories or weeds. A spirit of excellence. I have heard of a spirit of excellence. You've got to be very careful in a spirit of excellence that it doesn't become performance driven. Excellence is doing things the best way you can in line with the heart of God. Performance is having to do it well, otherwise you will be judged and found wanting, and that will produce fear in your doing. The desire for excellence is to do something which brings glory and honor to God. Trying to do something for performance is so that you will be recognized. So there's a big difference between those two things. So whenever I hear people talk about the spirit of excellence, you've really got to get what that spirit really is and not what it can be from our own perspective. Because I've heard a lot of people who are being driven to be excellent because they actually don't feel excellent. You can express excellency because you are a son of God and you know yourself and you know your identity, and therefore you can just be yourself, without having to try and perform for anyone else. That's the danger. You don't have to perform for God, and you definitely don't have to perform for people. Just be free to be you. And if people don't like that you, tough luck on them, because they're not going to receive the blessing of who you are. Don't ever be manipulated to try and be what someone else wants you to be. Just be the best you that God has created you to be. That's all you have to be, is you. Because you are the person that God has given these authority, these positions to, not anybody else. So easy to get fear of man. It's a snare and a trap. So who are the seven spirits of God? Well, they're before the throne. They're obviously not the Holy Spirit, because there's 7 of them, and they're before the throne, and the Holy Spirit's on the throne with the Father and Jesus. So Revelation 1:4 talks about that, 7 spirits. So if, in a sense, this is like greetings from beyond the veil, if you think. John, to the 7 churches who are in Asia, grace to you and peace from him who is, and who was, and who is to come, Father, Son, and Spirit, from the 7 spirits who are before his throne. So actually, they're communicating with us, wanting to let us know that they're there, and they're giving us greetings. Well, I never read that, because I never ever thought that the 7 spirits of God were beings that I could even relate to or connect to, or never even thought I could go to heaven. So there's greetings beyond the veil, which is an indication that they want to be involved. That engagement is something they want to have with us. Revelation 4:5, there were the 7 lamps of fire burning before the throne, which are the 7 spirits of God. Now, they're always pictured as lamps, like physical lamps, but it's a description of their function, not their form. Greek will be, they're lamps. They're not lamps. They're beings. Do they exhibit the light of God? Yes, that's their function, but they're not lamps. So when you see pictures of the throne room, you see it painted with these lamps. That's not my experience of what they look like. Revelation 5:6, I saw between the throne with the 4 living creatures and the elders a lamb standing, having 7 horns, 7 eyes, which are the 7 spirits of God sent out into all the earth. Now, actually, Jesus isn't a lamb with 7 horns and 7 eyes. He's Jesus. So it's a description of something which is indicating that the 7 spirits carry the authority of Jesus. Horns represents government, and eyes represents the ability to see and have insight. And they're actually sent out into the earth to engage with us, not just stuck in heaven. Now, in all these things, there's a thing of, well, if there's only 7 of them and they're actually beings, how do they relate to 1 billion people? Well, it doesn't make any sense, does it? Well, the same as wisdom doesn't relate to. How does the Father enable to relate to you and me and everybody else on the throne of grace at the same time? Because heaven functions in a multiverse environment. It isn't like earth in the same way. So the capacity that God has, and which he has endued to some of his created beings, is to be able to engage with everybody because he enables them to do so. Now, a whole load of people can go into a classroom and listen to one of them, because I've heard people say that that's what they've seen and what they've done. So there is this sense where when we read these very descriptive things, don't get caught up in the form and try and find some lamb somewhere with 7 horns and 7 eyes, because it doesn't exist. It's a description of the abilities that Jesus has imparted to the 7 spirits to carry his authority and his ability to see, and to impart that ability to us. So lamps equals light or illumination, fire equals heat or refining, throne equals government, lamb equals sacrifice, horns equals authority, eyes equals revelation, insight, perception, and they're sent out with a purpose. So don't get caught up on what they look like, engage them and experience what they want to impart so that you can get to know them and learn from them, or certainly be open for them to be at work in our lives, even if we're not always aware what they're doing. They will be at work if we create that environment. If we have a desire, they will be drawn by that desire. Do I want to be tutored and trained? Absolutely. I want that desire to cause those who are trainers and tutors to come towards me. If I'm not wanting to be, they won't. You know? So God wants to change our desire all the time to be in line with his. So when something is sent out, it is given a purpose, a mandate, authority to do a job, and the seven spirits have been given that. The purpose is to empower you and me to establish the kingdom and to express it as heirs of God to the world around us that really needs that. It needs our sonship. It needs us. The world needs to see our glory as reflecting his kingdom. The question is, are we willing to say, here am I, send me? So we can also be sent out with a mission and a passion, because that's what they're equipping us to do. What they have been equipped to do, they equip us to do, which is to go out and embrace our destiny and fulfill what we're called to do. 2 Chronicles 16:9 says this, for the eyes of the Lord move to and fro throughout the earth, that he may strongly support those whose heart is completely his. That is talking about the seven spirits of God. The eyes of the Lord, 7 eyes. Yeah. So when we read that, you know, the Father doesn't have eyes, like he's a spirit, you know what I mean? Yes, he can appear to us in a way that we relate to, but you know, his eyes aren't wandering around the universe somewhere independently, you know, just wandering around. It'd be really weird, wouldn't it? We bumped into all these eyes, you know, but you do get like the angels having all these eyes on their wings, the cherubim and the seraphim, because it's a representation that they are representing God's ability to see and to engage, because they're looking for us. They're looking to engage with us. That's the purpose of the eyes.
So how do you know it's the fact that nothing's really...
Well, there's always something happening in our life. But in a sense, you can only surrender what you can surrender. And you just have to trust that if it isn't, he will continually to transform you until more and more and more of it is. And that comes relationally, and it comes through a process, and it comes through transformation. The thing is not to be concerned about it. If we get caught up in trying to change our heart, our focus is on the problem rather than the solution. If we behold him and spend time with him, he'll deal with our heart. Don't spend time trying to deal with your own heart, because you're then doing it by DIY methods. Allow him to do it the way he wants to do it. Just respond to him. Whenever you need to respond to him, just respond. And most of the time, he is not so concerned about us as we are. You know, and the religious thing will get us into sort of a bondage thing. Well, I'm not good enough. Well, I'm not ready enough. I'm not, you know, and it's all about me. It's not about me. It's about him. You know, it's not about me, myself, and I. You know, we're not doing it my way. We want to do it his way, which is relational, in love, and out of ongoing process and journey, not an event. You know, in some times it would be great to think we could have our, you know, makeover. We'll have a weekend makeover and we'll all be different completely. Well, that's not a relational really way that God does it. But if there's anything that he wants to deal with, he can let you know. But we can be proactive. Search my heart, oh God, and know me. Show me if there's anything in me, any anxiety, any worry, any concerns, any iniquitous way that might trip me up in the future and take me somewhere that I don't want to go, or where you don't want me to go. Show me. You know, if it's in my genetic material, show me. If it's a hidden belief system, show me. Just be open. You know, if you have that desire, I guarantee he will continue to purify your heart. And actually, sometimes he's doing it and you don't even know. You know, and you find that you think differently. Oh, you know, sometimes actually Other people notice sometimes more than you do. Isaiah 11:2 is where the list of the seven spirits is. The Spirit of the Lord will rest on him, the spirit of wisdom and understanding, the spirit of counsel and might or strength, the spirit of knowledge and the fear of the Lord. And he will delight in the fear of the Lord, and he will not judge by what he sees, what his eyes see, nor make a decision by what his ears hear. And this is the important process of this. We're being trained not to judge out of our own understanding and our own memory and out of our own experience, but to see things the way he sees them. The seven spirits of God are there to help us be able to engage things the way God would. And that may require us not to make judgments until we're given the authority to be able to judge righteously and in love, and actually not just to go what you see in the natural sense, or make a decision by what you hear in the natural sense. I can hear something naturally that I could try and judge and interpret and be completely wrong. That's why I need to have discernment that comes from training my spiritual senses to discern, which is why we practice to do it. So the seven spirits of God are not the Holy Spirit. They are created heavenly beings created to train and mandate us. And they sort of testate to our covenant of adoption, which is a whole other passage. So they're often associated with a color. And colors obviously represent different aspects of light. So white light, let's say pure white light, creative light, if you engage a prism, can be split into 7 colors. So these 7 colors represent the light of God, but in different perspectives that enable you to tune into them. So the Spirit of the Lord is red, Spirit of wisdom orange, Spirit of understanding yellow, Spirit of counsel green, Spirit of might is blue, Spirit of knowledge is indigo, and the Spirit of the fear of the Lord is violet or purple. I don't really know the difference, to be honest, between violet and purple. It seems all purple stuff to me. But in the 7 colors of the rainbow, it says violet. So violet or purple. Yeah. So in all this, in a sense, God is light, and in him there's no darkness. He is creative light, and that's the ultimate speed of light that can be. That contains all the wavelengths, bandwidths, electromagnetic features, all contained within him. So a prism is a pyramid. That is a symbol of government, and it's the symbol of government that displays the light of God. And the 7 spirits of God contain color, wavelength, frequency, vibration, fragrance, shape, all sorts of things that are there to help the light of God be distributed into the earth. So I've got these nice little pictures of pyramids taking white light, and so when we engage the different colors, they give us a perspective of what the pure white light is, which you don't necessarily see when you just see the white light, because it's just white, but it contains way more than you can just perceive in that way. That's why it splits it up. So what do these do? The Spirit of the Lord mandates us for position. So they give us an insight into what we're authorized to do. Spirit of wisdom equips us for position. The Spirit of understanding authorizes us for position. Spirit of counsel prepares us for position. Spirit of might reveals us for position. Spirit of knowledge empowers us for position. And the Spirit of the fear of the Lord brings accountability for position. That's what they will do, and that's what their aspects of light are about. And they want to help us to understand all that stuff. Now, that's a lot, So, did I sit down and learn all that in a lecture base? No, I didn't. I started to learn that as I was shown the places of heaven, as I was given things to do in heaven. I realized that I needed equipping. I realized that I needed to know my authority. I realized that I needed to be prepared in many areas. And so that's what they can do. So what is a position? Well, we looked at this. This is our strategic place where we're in heaven seated. It gives us advantage. It is our position of authority. It shows our rank, in other words, in terms of our roles that we play. Rather than not a rank above others, but a place where we operate in the authority that we've been given. So all those things. So all those positions, as we saw, are also connected to God's government and connected to sacred geometry and how the dimensions are all operating. So we need to engage them to find out how we can be the best me, how you can be the best you, so that we can actually fulfill our role in government and learn how to do that. So what is a mandate? An official order or commissioning to do something. So you have a mandate associated with your whole life and destiny that God has already agreed, but you may not know fully what it is or how that relates to your life. A mandate gives someone authority to act in a certain way. And other words for mandate: instruction, directive, direction, decree, command, order, injunction, edict, charge, commission. You've been commissioned, but you might not know what the full commission is. So the Spirit of the Lord will give you some insight into that. And it's about positional dominion, about where we are in the realms of the kingdom. I'm not going to go through all of this, but I will leave the slides there so you can go back over it later if you want to. But it does teach us about order. That's our position of government, to bring order, to bring justice, to bring the kingdom into the earth. So all that glory realm, and particularly in terms of how that relates to who God is and how God functions, I found the Spirit of the Lord helped me a lot. And my first encounters with the Spirit of the Lord really was the first insights into what God was really like. Because the Spirit of the Lord took me to this big screen. Now, is there a big screen in heaven? No, not really, I don't think. But in reality, what he was trying to show me something, and so this got my attention. So it was a way of revealing something to me by showing me a vision, which I saw on a screen. And it was a vision of numerous things that actually showed that God could operate in using the same thing in different ways. So that was showing me that what I assumed might be anger was love, because God is love, and what he does might appear to be, ooh, but actually it's all good. So first of all, I saw the sun warming a garden, and it was a beautiful summer's day, and it was just, oh, this is awesome. I can sunbathe in this, and it was lovely. But then I saw the sun burning in the desert with fierce heat. It's the same sun, but in some situations, God wants us to feel, wow, this is amazing. And in some situations, he wants us to feel this situation is going to accomplish something different than this one does. It's the same sun, but it accomplishes different things. And actually, God is like that. So we can't just assume that this was bad, so that can't be God. Actually, some things God does to challenge us. So I had lots of these things. Same with water. A bubbling river. It was a beautiful scene. Still waters. Oh, wonderful. I can lie down by still waters. But actually, then a raging torrent capable of incredible power and seemingly destruction. The same water used in different situations has different effects. Now, what he was really trying to show me, and there were several other things like a fire, warming my hands on a cold winter's night by a beautiful open fire, but then a raging inferno like a forest fire. Now, you can look at one and think that's good, and think the other and think that's bad. But actually, what he was showing me is actually God does things very differently, and don't make assumptions about when you look at things out of your own understanding. And I learned much more about this when we looked at the nature of God in terms of what happens if God's angry. What does that look like? Well, Jesus seemed to show some anger when he cleaned the money changer's temple and all that stuff, but he's still love. So whatever that appeared to be, it was still love, but expressed in a different way than love will be expressed when he was sat down with his disciples and talking to them, perhaps. So I saw a lot of things like that. He showed me different things that showed me the different aspects of righteousness and justice, and how they completely still represented the fullness of God, because justice, the way I thought about it, was people getting their just desserts, because that's how we tend to think about it. our justice tends to be punitive or retributive. They deserve to get justice. In other words, they've done something bad, so they deserve to get found out and punished. Whereas actually that isn't God's view of justice. So it challenged me about my thinking. When I started to see things, the Spirit of the Lord showed me the way God's mind works. Now, at this point, this was just an introduction that would begin to go on until more and more I would start to see that my understanding is not God's understanding, and I could not apply my understanding to God or anything else, actually. So, it was so many different things that were all related to that. In a sense, it's like we need the Spirit of the Lord in our lives. When I came out of these encounters with the Spirit of the Lord, the first practical demonstration of this was people asking for ministry and asking me to pray for them, which I used to do a lot of. And they would tell me their woes and what was going on in their life. And then they would say, can you help me? Can you pray that this would stop or that would stop or I'd be free from this? So I started to ask the Spirit of the Lord, what is God doing in this situation? Because I found that my own compassion and the person's desire could get them out of situations that God was using. So I started to ask for insight into, do I need to help this person out of this situation, or do I need to help this person go through this situation and learn from what it is? Now, I'm not talking about things like sickness and stuff like that, because God doesn't have any of that to do. But there are situations which may seem quite difficult, but are training situations, which are situations that teach us to overcome. And if you remove the situation, you can learn to overcome. So sometimes people want the easy life. They don't want to learn to overcome. In fact, probably all of us want that, But the reality is, how do we grow the most? Through the trials and troubles and tribulations that we face that show us how to overcome them and conquer them. That's what it says in the Bible. Count it all joy, brothers, when you encounter various trials. Well, I wish that verse wasn't in the Bible, But it is, and it shows that God knows what we need in every situation and circumstances. And sometimes it's a warm embrace, and sometimes it's a cold wind. Now, they're both God. But sometimes we attribute the cold wind to the enemy and the warm embrace to God. And actually, they're both him. So it's really important that we really flow with this. Now, Spirit of Wisdom equips. Equipping is to supply with the necessary items for a particular purpose, to supply with the necessities such as tools or provisions, to furnish with the qualities necessary for performance. These are all just dictionary definitions, but they do give some insight. To furnish or provide with whatever is needed for whatever is used for any undertaking, such as to fit out an army or a ship. That's what equipping really is. And the Spirit of Wisdom, not wisdom herself, but the Spirit of Wisdom helps us with that process. And so if we need something like insight, then the Spirit of Wisdom can give us insight. If we need something like a sword, the Spirit of Wisdom can use a sword, help us to use a sword, not to chop people's heads off, but maybe to chop some dragons' heads off, or to make a dividing line, because Jesus said he came to bring a sword. That sword created a line that gave people an opportunity to choose to step over it. So sometimes we bring choices to people that says, here's an opportunity for you to embrace something. It is a sword, but you're not slaying them with it. You're using it with incision to show there's a choice to be made. That's what a sword can do. There's lots of things like that. I think let's just go and engage them is the best thing to do, because that really is what will initially begin to give you insight into what they do, is to meet some of them. I don't know who and what are the best ones for you to meet. God does, but we'll sort of look at how we do that in terms of engaging. So let's sort of be open for that. You may engage with a color. You may engage with a person. You may engage with thoughts in your mind of that person or being talking to you. So as we do the same thing, we're going to engage in heaven where the seven spirits are operating, and engaging in that realm, we can begin in that realm to effectively begin to just see what God will do. I don't know what he's going to do with you. When I engage these things, I find that he does all sorts of different things with all sorts of different people, which is open to him to do. So let's be willing to embrace that and engage it. So encourage you again to just begin to close your eyes, picture that ladder going up into heaven, if that helps you, Jacob's ladder, the invitation that there is to come up here. So as you just wait in his presence, just begin to let that form in your imagination. Use your imagination as the doorway, or if you just have the ability to step in and out of that realm at will, just do it. Just take a step through the veil into the realm of heaven. Now Jesus is standing in the doorway, he's waiting for us. Let's engage with him. And I would just ask you, Jesus, that you would take each person where they are in their particular situation in their life right now, and just lead them to the seven spirits of God, so that their mandate, their destiny, their position of authority in the heavens, that you can give them help to help them understand it, help them be able to function there. Just begin to unveil and reveal that. I just ask you to unveil and reveal each of the seven spirits to each of the people here who need to engage. Just take those who need to engage with the Spirit of the Lord, to engage with that being, to the spirit of wisdom or the spirit of understanding or counsel, each of them. So just be open for Jesus to lead you, maybe towards a color, maybe towards a being that you can see, maybe just to receive wisdom or insight or thoughts into your mind. So I'm going to ask him to take you, first of all, to your throne to be seated. So go back to your throne, take your seat, because this is a place and position, and then let him bring the seven spirits to you and let him introduce them to you so that you get a sense of who they are and what they might have to be able to help you in that position of authority. Okay. Now, again, this is just an exercise for you first to start to pursue. Whenever you're sat on your throne and you're wondering, what should I do? Ask Jesus to send one of the seven spirits to help you. You know, this is how you learn. If you want to sign up for a course that they might run, if you're in that place where you can do that sort of thing, because I don't know where you all are on your journey, whether that's possible for you or not. You see, as Jesus takes you to a place and you keep asking him to take you to a place, it becomes a place that becomes part of you. Then you can go there by thought. So I don't have to think, Jesus, can you take me to my mountain? I just have to think about my throne and I'm there. If I'm thinking about a court, I think about it and I'm there. Because I've walked there and practiced and gone there so many times, it's now just an access point for me just by thought. But when you're first learning, you have to go back to places time and time again and usually ask God to take you there. And then it becomes part of you. So if you want to sign up for anything, just ask Jesus to take you to the training hall. And in that training hall, there's all these desks which you can go and put your name down for things. You know, that was what I saw, what I was shown. Although I've done it myself, but I know others who have, and I talked to them about it, and they've said that some of it was very cognitive and some of it was just, they just know they received revelation that was going to change their life. So don't be sort of conditioned to what it might be for you, but be open for it. Well, the training hall has an ante room, which is where you sign up, and then it has various lecture places you can go and sit with one of the seven spirits and receive revelation. Yeah, whether it's whatever it is for you, that's something you can go. If you desire that and that works for you, set your heart on it and ask God to take you there. If you think, oh no, I'd rather do on-the-job stuff and just be seeking for when I need it, well, just do that. You know, there's no formula to any of this. This is the key. Everything's relational, and you just need to go with what you feel led to do. You know, I'm just giving you some options, a menu of potential things. So you go to Wisdom's Heights, and on Wisdom's Heights, I spent a lot of time on Wisdom's Heights. It's an awesome place. On Wisdom's Heights, there are doors that give you access to various places. One of them is into Zion, Mountain of God, and in through that door, there is one of the training halls are there. That's where I've engaged it. There are also 7 pillars on Wisdom's Heights that you can step into and be trained and equipped, particularly if you're going to embrace a mandate, because that can help you with the mandate of development. And there's a whole process of going through 7 pillars. No, I've never taught that. A friend of mine really introduced that to me. I went in the pillars years ago, and they were like, wow, but I didn't really pursue it to go and find out what they all did. I just thought, oh, wow, that was good, you know, but went on to other things. But my friend of mine, he pursued it, and he said, oh, have you been in the 7 pillars? I said, well, I've been in there, but I've not really pursued it. He said, oh, I was shown this and this. I thought, oh, wow, that's awesome. You know, here's how you can develop a mandate from an idea or a principle to full out working, or a blueprint, and the whole process. So I will teach that when we do probably dual realms living, I think, or actually maybe even bringing heaven to the earth. But there are so many more things and places that are there to discover, way beyond whatever I've been to. There's more. So sometimes Jesus will just take you on an exploration journey to show you some of them more. And what resonates with you, you then begin to pursue. If it doesn't resonate yet, you don't. I didn't resonate with the pillars of wisdom, although I found them quite interesting, until this guy said, oh, this is what they're for. This is what I was shown. I thought, oh, yeah, that'll be really useful. So then I went back and engaged them and learned that.
What's the difference between spiritual wisdom and wisdom?
Wisdom, if you read Proverbs 8, wisdom was the very first created being before everything else was created, and has been with God from the beginning. The spirit of wisdom is one of the 7 spirits of God, which is another created being, which was created subsequent to wisdom. So wisdom for me is a feminine personality that carries deep wisdom, but particularly to help us rule. And if you sort of look at it from Proverbs 8. I've got some scriptures there if I can find them, but Proverbs 8 describes wisdom calling to the sons of men that we would engage. So does not wisdom call and understanding lift up her voice? Because wisdom has other angelic beings that work with her. Understanding is an angel, an order of angels, in fact, who lift up her voice. On the top of the heights, beside the way, where the paths meet, she takes her stand. Beside the gates, at the opening of the city, at the entrance of the doors, she cries out, to you, O men, I call, and my voice is to the sons of men. So that describes wisdom's heights. Wisdom's heights is at the top of the realm of the kingdom of heaven and leads into heaven. So the gate is the gate into the city of Zion. The doors are doors that go into the stars, under the earth, into the atmosphere, and other places. You can find the way. So there are paths that meet there, ancient paths that people walked on into eternity, and various things are there. It's a very mystical place that has all sorts of things, and it's a place I love to go. But I love to engage wisdom. I love to embrace her. If you've ever seen the movie The Shack, wisdom is presented there as a person who gives insight into the things that carry the deep things of God, because she's been with God from the beginning. You know, what it says then in Proverbs 8:15, it says this, by me kings reign and rulers decree justice. By me princes rule and nobles who all judge rightly. I love those who love me, and those who diligently seek me will find me. So there's a role there in helping us reign as kings, ruling and decreeing justice, in princes ruling. So there are different roles for different people at different times, and nobles who rule, judge rightly, and rulers who decree things. So all these things are helping us in our government, and she's calling, and she wants us to come to wisdom's heights. And again, if you desire it, set your heart there and ask Jesus to take you there and introduce you to wisdom. You know, I spent a lot of time there when I was learning all the protocols of the things that the courts have, because that's what she's there for, to help me to understand how to rule, how to effectively use the courts, how to actually administrate that and outwork it. And so obviously I'll leave all the slides on there so you can look at the rest of the stuff I didn't actually teach, so that you can read through it and look at how you can engage wisdom and wisdom's heights, and you know how that might lead you into other places and stuff, which is good. It's all good, and you know, don't expect to find everything in a day.